The following night, Claire found herself unable to resist the pull of the icy moonlit landscape. She slipped out of the cabin once more, her boots crunching softly against the snow. This time she headed to a hidden clearing she'd discovered, a lead place where the mountains stretched endlessly under the stars. She stood there, her breath forming little clouds. When she felt him before she saw him, Andrew's presence was magnetic. He emerged silently from the shadows, his tall frame outlined by the silvery light. He didn't say a word at first, just walked toward her. His eyes locked on hers as though he had been waiting for this moment. Couldn't sleep again? His voice was a soft murmur, the intimacy of it making her shiver, not from the cold but from the warmth, spreading through her chest. She nodded, unable to speak as he closed the distance between them. When he reached out, his gloved fingers traced the edge of her scarf before gently tugging it loose, exposing the tender skin of her neck to the frigid air. The contrast of the cold night and his warm touch sent a spark racing down her spine. "You're freezing," he whispered, stepping closer. His hands moved to cup her cheeks, his thumbs brushing her skin lightly. "I'm fine," she breathed, though her voice betrayed her trembling. Andrew leaned down, his forehead resting against hers, his breath mingling with hers in the stillness of the clearing. His lips hovered close, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from them. When he finally kissed her, it was unhurried, soft, and lingering, as if they had all the time in the world. Her hands found their way to his chest, the warmth of his jacket contrasting with the firm muscles beneath. As the kiss deepened, Andrew pulled her closer, their bodies pressed together. The world around them faded into nothingness, the snow, the stars, the cabin far behind them. There was only the intoxicating heat between them. The way his hands slid down to her waist, drawing her even closer. They spent hours in that clearing, wrapped in each other's arms. Andrew removed his gloves, his bare hands exploring the delicate curve of her neck, her shoulders, her back. His touch was reverent, as if memorizing every inch of her. Claire's fingers tangled in his hair, her heart pounding wildly as she gave herself over to the moment. When the cold became too much, Andrew led her to a small rock ledge, where they sat wrapped in a single blanket he'd brought. She rested her head on his shoulder, her hand tracing lazy circles on his chest as he held her close. "Do you ever wonder why this feels so inevitable?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a mix of wonder and guilt. Andrew kissed the top of her head, his fingers trailing along her arm. "Maybe because it was meant to be, even if it's not forever." Claire sighed, letting herself believe his words for the night. They stayed there until the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky. As they walked back to the cabin hand in hand, their fingers entwined, Claire knew that no matter how fleeting this was, it had already changed her in ways she couldn't explain. The family vacation in the snow-covered mountains was supposed to be an escaper, chance to unwind, reconnect, and find peace in nature's beauty. Instead, it became the backdrop for an irresistible and forbidden connection between Claire and Andrew. On the third night, the cabin fell silent as everyone retreated to bed early, lulled by the cold mountain air and the coziness of the roaring fire. Claire, however, found herself restless, her thoughts consumed by Andrew. The pull toward him had become undeniable. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside, the crisp air nipping at her cheeks. Andrew was waiting, standing at the edge of the tree line. His figure was illuminated by the silvery glow of the moonlight. Without a word, he held out his hand. Claire hesitated for only a moment before taking it, his fingers warm and firm around hers. He led her through the forest path, their footsteps crunching softly in the snow, until they arrived at a secluded lookout. The view was breathtaking, endless mountains bathed in moonlight. A blanket of stars stretched across the sky, but Claire barely noticed. All her focus was on Andrew as he turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and restraint. "I shouldn't have brought you here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But you did, Claire replied, stepping closer. Her breath formed little clouds in the cold, but her body burned with heat. Andrew reached out, his hand brushing the side of her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, her heart racing. When she opened them again, he was watching her, his expression raw and unguarded. I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. Claire didn't reply. Instead, she closed the gap between them, her lips capturing his in a kiss that was as tender as it was passionate. Andrew responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, their breaths mingling in the cold night air, their bodies pressed together as if trying to bridge every inch of distance. They found a hidden clearing nestled between the trees, a place shielded from prying eyes. Andrew spread out a thick blanket he'd brought, and they sat down, huddling together for warmth. The glow of the stars above seemed to mirror the heat building between them. Andrew's hands explored her face, her neck, her shoulders, as if committing every detail to memory. Claire's fingers trailed down his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her touch. Their movements were unhurried, savoring the intimacy of each moment. Tell me this isn't a mistake, Claire whispered, her voice trembling. It's not, Andrew assured her, his lips brushing against her temple. It feels too real to be wrong. He kissed her again, this time slower, his lips tracing a path down her jawline and neck. Claire tilted her head back, her hands gripping his shoulders as she surrendered to the sensations. The cold air seemed to vanish, replaced by the warmth radiating between them. Hours passed as they lay entwined beneath the stars, their whispered conversations punctuated by stolen kisses. Andrew's hand rested on her waist, his thumb tracing lazy circles over her sweater. Claire's fingers played with the strands of his hair, her heart full yet conflicted. I wish this could last forever, she murmured. Andrew propped himself up on one elbow, gazing down at her. Maybe it doesn't have to end. But Claire knew better. The reality of their lives waited for them back at the cabin, back in the world where this connection was forbidden. For now, though, she chose to live in the moment, letting herself fall deeper into his embrace. The final goodbye. On their last night in the mountains, Andrew found Claire alone in the living room, staring into the dying embers of the fireplace. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Come with me, he urged. This time, he led her to a frozen lake at the base of the mountain, the ice reflecting the soft glow of the moon. The silence was profound, broken only by their breaths. Andrew pulled her into his arms, swaying gently as if dancing to an unheard melody. I don't want this to be the end, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Claire cupped his face, her thumbs brushing over his cheeks. It has to be, she said, her voice breaking. But I'll never forget this. Their final kiss was bittersweet, a mixture of passion and heartbreak. They held each other tightly, as if trying to memorize the feeling before it slipped away. When they returned to the cabin, they parted without another word, knowing the magic of their time in the mountains would remain their secret forever.